Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel once again. Today I want to bring you the top 10 books that I read during all of 2021. I had a pretty good reading year in 2021. I think I read around 37 novels. I believe it was somewhere around that number, which is pretty good for me. I mean, it's a pretty good clip to be going at. And among those 37 or close to 40 novels, I read a lot of really good books. So it was pretty tough to narrow this down to only 10, but I managed to. And hey, I hope you can take these 10 novels and hey, take from it what you will, and maybe you'll find some hidden gems in this pile and have some entertaining reads for yourself. So without further ado, let's get into it and check out the top 10 books from 2021. So I think I'm going to read the synopses of these books from what's on the back or the inner flap jacket. Because I've already reviewed all these books in different videos this year. So I'll just read the synopses to you and yeah, maybe say a word or two about the novel, what I thought, but I'm not going to get too in depth in terms of reviewing the novel because like I said, I've already done that on different videos. At number 10, we have Carrion Comfort by Dan Simmons. They are mind vampires, creatures with the psychic ability to use humans. Read their minds, subjugate them to their wills, experience through their senses, feed off their emotions, force them to acts of unspeakable violence. Each year, 3 of them, Melanie, Willie, and Nina, meet to discuss their ongoing competition of vampirism and slaughter. But this year, something goes wrong, and they and their innocent victims are plunged into a struggle that will determine the future of the world itself. Ranged against them is a handful of normals. Saul Lasky, psychologist and concentration camp survivor, who has devoted his life to tracking down the Nazi vampire von Borchert. Natalie Preston, whose father inadvertently and fatally crossed the path of the ancient and deadly Melanie. Sheriff Bobby Joe Gentry, dragged in while investigating a series of murders. Together, they create a strange and vulnerable alliance against evil. This novel is a very long and dense read, but if you get into this one, you're definitely going to enjoy it if you like what you heard from the synopsis there. This is a very entertaining read, and once again, if you're familiar with Dan Simmons, he definitely knows how to world build and really tell a long and dense tale. It's a good one. At number 9, The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This is what he remembers as he sits by the ocean at the end of the lane. A dead man on the back seat of the car, and warm milk at the farmhouse. An ancient little girl and an old woman who saw the moon being made. A beautiful housekeeper with a monstrous smile. And dark forces woken that were best left undisturbed. They are memories hard to believe, waiting at the edges of things. The recollections of a man who thought he was lost, but is now perhaps remembering a time when he was saved. This novel is definitely a dark fantasy. I thought it read more like a poem, a long poem, than anything else. It's a very different read than what I usually surround myself with, but this is beautifully written. American Gods is what introduced me to Neil Gaiman, and this was my second read by him, and I was not disappointed. Like I said, it's a beautiful, beautiful novel with just a great story and a lot of really nice undertones to go along with it. If you're into fantasy, especially dark fantasy, check this one out. At number 8, Midnight's Lair by Richard Laymon. Mordoc's Cave is one of the wonders of the world, a place where thousands of sightseers every year take an awe-inspiring boat trip on a lake deep beneath the Earth's surface and marvel at nature's handiwork. But the darkness is also the home of things nature never intended. Things violent, bestial, and obscenely evil. And when a sudden power failure traps a group of tourists underground, the unnatural creatures who dwell there emerge from the depths. This one will bring you in early, that's for sure. Just like Richard Laymon does with most of his novels, he'll hook you in, and just an absolute page turner. You'll get through these ones pretty quick. If you don't know much about Laymon, they're adult reads. I mean, he definitely doesn't hold anything back. I wouldn't recommend these for people of too young of an age, but purely entertaining author, action-packed. You can't really go wrong with a Laymon novel. Really love this one. At number 7, The Terror by Dan Simmons. The men on board HMS Terror have every expectation of triumph. As part of the 1845 Franklin expedition, the first steam-powered vessels ever to search for the legendary Northwest Passage, they are as scientifically supported an enterprise as has ever set forth. As they enter a second summer in the Arctic Circle without a thaw, they are stranded in a nightmarish landscape of encroaching ice and darkness. Endlessly cold, with diminishing rations, 126 men fight to survive with poisonous food, a dwindling supply of coal, and ships buckling in the grip of crushing ice. But their real enemy is far more terrifying. There is something out there in the frigid darkness, an unseen predator stalking their ship, a monstrous terror constantly clawing to get in. This book is historical fiction. The Franklin expedition is a real story about ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, that did end up getting lost searching for the Northwest Passage. So it's really cool to read the historical facts that actually go along with this novel. He puts in a little, I guess you could call it, sci-fi element to it as well, as we don't know what's stalking them on the ice. Really, really great read. Very long. You're going to have to take some time and sink your teeth into this one, but you will not regret it. Really good novel. At number 6, The Final Girl Support Group from Grady Hendrix. In horror movies, the final girl is the one who's left standing when the credits roll. The one who fought back, defeated the killer, and avenged her friends. The one who emerges bloodied but victorious. But after the sirens fade and the audience moves on, what happens to her? Lynette Tarkington is a real-life final girl who survived a massacre 22 years ago, and it has defined every day of her life since. And she's not alone. For more than a decade, she's been meeting with 5 other actual final girls and their therapist in a support group for those who survived the unthinkable, putting their lives back together piece by piece. That is until one of the women misses a meeting and Lynette's worst fears are realized. Someone knows about the group and is determined to take their lives apart again, piece by piece. But the thing about these final girls is that they have each other now. And no matter how bad the odds, how dark the night, how sharp the knife, they will never, ever give up. This book, if you are a horror fan, especially a classic horror fan, especially a slasher fan, you definitely have to read this book. That's all I'm going to say. It pays homage to all those classic horror movies, and it is just so good. Grady Hendrix is such a unique writer, and I just can't wait for what he's got next. At number 5, The Chill by Scott Carson, aka Michael Carita. Far upstate in New York's ancient forests, a drowned village lies beneath the deep, still waters of the Chilliwackee Reservoir. Early in the 20th century, the town was destroyed for the greater good, bringing water to the millions living downstate. Or at least that's what the politicians from Manhattan insisted at the time. The local families settled there since before America's founding were forced from their land, but they didn't move far, and some didn't move at all. Now, a century later, the repercussions of human arrogance are finally making themselves known. An inspector assigned to oversee the dam, dangerously neglected for decades, witnesses something inexplicable. It turns out that more than the village was left behind in the waters of the Chill when it was abandoned. The townspeople didn't evacuate without a fight. A dark prophecy remained, and the time has come for it to be fulfilled. Those who remember must ask themselves, who will be next? For sacrifices must be made, and as the restless waters begin to rise inexorably, the demand for a fresh sacrifice emerges from the deep. This is another one that really grips you early. A lot of creepy stuff early on in this novel that will definitely get you hooked, like I said. Love this novel. It was my first Michael Carita / Scott Carson experience, and I am looking forward to reading more of what he's got. Number 4, The Troop by Nick Cutter. Once a year, Scoutmaster Tim Riggs leads a troop of boys into the Canadian wilderness for a weekend camping trip. A tradition as comforting and reliable as a good ghost story around a roaring bonfire. But when an unexpected intruder stumbles upon their campsite, shockingly thin, disturbingly pale, and voraciously hungry, Tim and the boys are exposed to something far more frightening than any tale of terror. The human carrier of a bioengineered nightmare. A horror that spreads faster than fear. A harrowing struggle for survival with no escape from the elements, the infected, or one another. The Troop is a Crazy, crazy story. And it is full of body horror. So very gory. If you're not into that, this is not going to be the one for you. But if you can get past that, this one is a ride. I suggest checking this one out. At number 3, Let the Right One In by Avijde Lindqvist. Oscar is a 12-year-old boy living with his mother on a housing estate. He dreams about his absent father, gets bullied at school, and wets himself when he's frightened. Eli is the young girl who moves in next door. She doesn't go to school and never leaves the flat by day. She is a 200-year-old vampire, forever frozen in childhood and condemned to live on a diet of fresh blood. In very different ways, they were both victims, which is why, against the odds, they became friends, and how they came to depend on one another for life itself. This book is beautifully, beautifully written. I've read a bunch of Lindqvist novels now, and this one is the best, in my opinion. Loved this book so much, got through it so quick, such a great story, and like I said, just not a lot of horror novels I would consider as beautifully written as this, but this is one that it's a masterpiece in my opinion. Really, really love this novel. At number 2, The Chestnut Man by Soren Sveistrup. A psychopath is terrorizing Copenhagen. His calling card is a chestnut man, a handmade doll made of matchsticks and 2 chestnuts, which he leaves at each bloody crime scene. Examining the dolls, forensics makes a shocking discovery. A fingerprint belonging to a young girl, a government minister's daughter who had been kidnapped and murdered a year ago. A tragic coincidence or something more twisted? To save innocent lives, a pair of detectives must put aside their differences to piece together the Chestnut Man's gruesome clues. Because it's clear that the madman is on a mission that is far from over, and no one is safe. If you're looking for pure entertainment, this is the book for you. This one was so, so good. You'll want to get to the end so quick just to find out who it was. You know, typical detective murder mystery with a lot of creepy things going on. This one is purely just an awesome novel. And at number 1, the best novel I read last year, Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chizmar. In the summer of 1988, the mutilated bodies of several missing girls begin to turn up in a small Maryland town. The grisly evidence leads police to the terrifying assumption that a serial killer is on the loose in the quiet suburb, and soon a rumor begins to spread that the evil stalking local teens is not entirely human. But law enforcement and members of the FBI are certain the killer is a living, breathing madman, and that he's playing games with them. For a once peaceful community trapped in the depths of paranoia and suspicion, it feels like a nightmare that will never end. Recent college graduate Richard Chizmar returns to his hometown just as a curfew is enacted and a neighborhood watch group is formed. In the midst of preparing for his wedding and embarking on a writing career, he soon finds himself thrust into a real-life horror story. Inspired by the terrifying events, Chizmar writes a personal account of the serial killer's reign of terror, unaware that his time back home will continue to haunt him for years to come. This book, like The Chestnut Man, they're very similar. Maybe that's just my thing, putting them 1-2. A murder mystery where you're trying to find out who the killer is as the serial killer continues to wreak havoc. So entertaining, so good. And again, you're going to want to get to the end just to find out who it was and what exactly was going on. I can't recommend this one enough. I truly feel like you're not going to be disappointed if you pick this one up. All right, everyone, thanks once again for watching my video. If you made it this far, I truly do appreciate it. Give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe if you're into this kind of thing, if you enjoy reading, if you enjoy collection videos, that sort of thing, then this is the place to be. Once again, happy reading and well wishes in 2022.